in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome back to the BackMarkers F1 show. It is our Belgian Grand Prix race recap podcast, and I hope everybody out there had a good summer break. It was a long 4 weeks, or maybe a quick 4 weeks for you, but we hope all of our viewers on the internet had a good time away from Formula One, and now it's back to business. Chris Cato alongside you for the recap podcast, and we'll dive right into it. Before we get into the actual race itself, I just wanted to sort of go over some of the news and rumors. Obviously, there was a lot going on in the week with Force India, which is now Racing Point Force India, so we won't get into too much detail of it as it is slightly old news now, but I just wanted to bring forth something that was a little bit interesting I found post-qualifying. Of course, Esteban Ocon was on the P3 qualified with the changeable conditions in the rain. Excellent job by him and by the team, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But I just wanted to bring your attention to this clip between it was Esteban Ocon and Sebastian Vettel before they were going to do their ceremonial photograph for qualifying. And I'll play the video for you guys first. It's a little bit hard to hear the audio, but there was also somebody who wrote out what they were saying, because Seb was speaking in French a little bit with Esteban, so just have a quick listen here.
But the problem is that they don't have all the sensors, that for the load and everything, so you can be half a meal and you don't know what load you have on the car. L'année prochaine, tu vas où? Reste là, non? Non. Pas là, non. Non, c'est pris le siège. Ah oui? Voilà, devine. Hein? Celui qui a acheté. Oui, mais et l'autre? L'autre.
So there you have it. First of all, I didn't know Vettel speaks French. I guess it's one of the many languages that he speaks. I know he speaks a couple. Maybe not fluently, but at least a couple words here and there that he knows. So if you don't speak French, this was a sort of a transcript, or at least a quote there from Twitter. This is courtesy of Andrew Lloyd Collins on Twitter, and you see Vettel asking Esteban. He's like, next year, still nothing. Ocon says no. Vettel says, will you be here, implying at Force India. Ocon says, no, the seat is taken. To which Seb replies, oh yeah, who? And Ocon says, have a guess, the one who bought it. Yes, but the other one. And Ocon finishes with, well, the other one, meaning Sergio Perez, brings money. So this obviously isn't official confirmation, but, this is coming from Esteban Ocon himself. So I think that he maybe knows something that we don't know. Of course, with the rumors of Lance Stroll going over to Force India, if what Esteban here is talking about is true, then it does look like that is going to happen. Now, whether this happens in 2018 is yet to be decided. I think it might end up happening in 2019. So, by the looks of it, Force India will be switching drivers, according to Esteban Ocon, because he doesn't have a seat. But that, I think, will play out all in the weeks to come. This is still a new acquisition for Lawrence Stroll and the whole, changing of the team name. And, of course, they lost all their constructors' points. So we'll keep you guys updated to see what happens. But I just thought that was pretty interesting to hear from Esteban Ocon himself. And, questions of where will he go. Some have said McLaren, but there's been some rumors around the paddock that he might even be too tall for the McLaren chassis. So the only other option, if Stroll were to leave to Force India, that would open up a spot at Williams. But then what do you do with Robert Kubica, or does Sergei Sorokin leave? So maybe there's another seat there. But other than that, there's not much available for Ocon, which is such a terrible shame because, first of all, he's a really great kid, super respectful guy, very nice and easygoing. But then he's also a terrific driver. He had a streak last year of, I can't exactly remember how much, but he finished, 20-some-odd races in a row. Just a really solid driver, really clean driver, knowledgeable about setups, knowledgeable about how to take care of the car, managing the tires, and a good team player as well. So it would really be a shame if he were to get bounced out of Formula One, just because, like Lewis Hamilton says, the sport is sort of more aimed toward people that bring in the money, which, he does make a good point there, and also it's the same sport that has allowed him to compete with teams compete on teams like Mercedes that have more money. It's also good because he gets paid more, so it kind of goes both ways, I think. But yeah, that's one of the more interesting things that came out over the weekend. So if you guys missed it, there you have it. So we'll keep you updated on the Racing Point Force India situation. And just by the way, I was a bit confused because they were still using Force India sort of, you saw on some of the graphics and otherwise. So apparently the chassis name is still Force India, but the entity itself that's entered, under the FIA's Racing Point Force India. So that is the name as well. Okay, so moving on to the actual race itself. Round 13 of the F1 Championship, Lewis Hamilton was 24 points ahead coming into this race. Now only holds a 17-point lead heading into Monza next weekend. And, I mean, what a crazy lap one it was. We came back from the summer break with a bang because Fernando Alonso went careering over Charles Leclerc, reminiscent of the 2012 incident in Belgium that Romain Grosjean included. It wasn't as bad because I think in the 2012 one you had about 2 or 3 cars that went airborne. But this one was actually a bit more dangerous because I'll show you guys the clip here. But you actually see that Alonso, the floor of Alonso's car actually touches Charles Leclerc and hits it on the halo. So I'll play you guys the clip here from Sky Sports F1 on Twitter, and they kind of zoom it in a little bit here. It was a bit sort of tough to see on the broadcast just because the camera was a little bit wider, but this one you can see that they zoomed it in. So you see as he goes flying over the top, huge damage to the side here too. I can't tell if that was liquid coming out of the side or just, what do you call it, smoke. But you can see here, if I pause it right there, it's a bit trickier to see, but Alonso does actually land on that front part of Charles Leclerc's halo. And so we'll play out the rest here and then eventually land. So sort of more the tip floor of the car there where Alonso's sitting roughly hits the top of his halo and then bounces off to the side. And then, of course, massive damage, end of the race there. And then this was a tweet actually from from Leclerc post-race in which he says, "End of the race in the first corner, frustrating. Never been a fan of the halo, but I have to say that I was very happy to have it over my head today." That's really interesting. Of course, Leclerc was the rookie this year for Formula One, so he did some races, of course, in the lower categories without a halo, but he's sort of one of the drivers that has never raced in Formula One, pre-halo era. So it's interesting that he kind of voiced his opinion, saying that he was never really a fan of it, but now that he's experienced a crash in which without the halo, that car probably would have bounced on his head, now he's really thankful for it. So personally, obviously, I think if you guys have seen some of our previous podcasts that we weren't a fan of the halo, I think a lot of people still aren't, and even myself included. I definitely agree. It doesn't look great. It's sort of not what the sport has been throughout its almost 70-year history. It's always been sort of an open cockpit a series, but with the unfortunate accidents with Bianchi and then IndyCar, Justin Wilson, Dan Weldon, stuff like that, I think that they really looked into moving more into improving cockpit safety. And after seeing a crash like this, I think we can sort of end the halo debate. I think we can really put it to rest now because we've seen it now implied. We haven't really seen it being used too much, thankfully, this season. Maybe in Canada with the Stroll and the Hartley incident, but that was, sort of more of Hartley's tire just kind of roughly brushing it. But this was sort of the first incident where we've actually seen the bottom floor of a car or any bigger piece of debris actually hit the halo. And I'll pull up a picture because they showed Leclerc's halo afterwards. You can see that there's, some pretty significant damage, of course. Some serious sort of paint scuffs there you can see with the gray over the white halo. But when you look at the halo itself, it looks structurally intact, which is what it's meant to do. So, they obviously did a lot of testing before this, and we all heard that, yes, they can, withstand a 2-story London bus or double-decker bus, whatever it was. But now we know for sure that they can withstand, a Formula One car landing on top of it. So this is really good news, I think. You've heard a lot of comments from drivers, Rosberg, Alonso. A lot of these guys are praising the halo, thankful that it was there, like Leclerc says. So I think that we can finally maybe put this to rest. And I agree with some people out there on Twitter and social media saying that it still doesn't look the best, but at least it's safe, and we can assure driver safety. We just saw it last weekend with Robert Wickens in the Pocono race. If you guys caught a little bit of the IndyCar action, yeah, it didn't look good there for a while. It looked very reminiscent of, Dan Weldon accident in 2011. And through those 45 to 65 minutes where we didn't know the status of Robert Wickens, you didn't have a good feeling watching it because, people have watched that before. And if you're older and you've seen, the Greg Moore incidents and stuff like that, then you sort of know what that feels like. And it didn't really look good, but thankfully, he is okay now in the standpoint of he is awake. He's breathing on his own. He had a couple of back surgeries and more surgeries to come. So I think a long road to recovery for Wickens. But one of the first things I thought of after I said that is, how much would have a halo for IndyCar changed that accident? Of course, he got caught up in the catch fence there. So how much would a halo have come into play in that accident, and would it have maybe lessened the impact for Robert Wickens? I'm not sure. Of course, it's a different series. They race a lot on ovals, but we've seen the halo now really in the use in Formula One, and it looks like it's doing what it's supposed to do. So from that standpoint, I'm very happy with that. And honestly, they've done a pretty good job with integrating the halo with the look of the car. So we're 12, 13 races into it now. Honestly, after race 3 or 4, we didn't really notice it. So I think that's that on the halo. But really thankful that in this case, it did what it was supposed to do. And really that lap 1 incident kind of, set off a bunch of chain reaction events for, the next 5 or 10 laps. And we didn't even see a lot of the incidents. Ricardo smashed into Raikkonen, and we didn't really see it. I'm not sure if they showed a replay of it on the broadcast. I think they might have missed that just because of the action that happened afterwards. Or actually, excuse me, before we go to that, we can go to the Hulkenberg was, of course, the reason why Fernando Alonso, went flying over Charles Leclerc. So Hulkenberg just completely misjudged it, which I was surprised because Hulkenberg doesn't really make those kind of mistakes. He's usually, a pretty reasonable driver, a pretty smart driver as well. Doesn't make stupid mistakes like that. But that was a really stupid and dangerous mistake. Locked all 4 wheels. Nothing he could do about it. And even Alonso said, he saw in his mirrors that he was just coming for him, and that was it. So Hulkenberg actually was handed a penalty after he went to the steward. So it's a 10-place grid penalty in Monza. So he will bump down 10 places from wherever he qualifies in Italy. So, he started at the back of the grid this weekend, and most likely will be starting near the back, the next weekend in Italy as well. So not a good return from the summer break for Nico Hulkenberg. Getting back to the Ricardo Raikkonen incident, so they made contact somewhere, and it was really right after La Source, the first corner, that Raikkonen noticed the puncture. And completely the tire delaminated by the time he got to turn 8 or 9, so he was limping back home. Luckily for him, the safety car came out, so he could sort of be a bit slower, but it didn't really help, to be honest with you, because he did retire. Retired a little bit later on, just because there's way too much damage to the floor and probably to that rim as well, and I think it was the right rear. So he eventually retired. And then Ricardo was completely missing his rear wing, so that was gone. Managed to fix it in the garage. The Red Bull boys did a good job there, and he went out, for another, I think, 15, 20 laps, maybe even a bit more. But he was already a lap or 2 down, just trying to make back time there, which I was kind of surprised that they let him back out there, considering that he was down a lap and it didn't look like he was going to get anywhere near the points. So I kind of figured maybe it would have been smarter just to retire him earlier and save the engine parts, save the components. But they didn't. So they let him run, and then they just decided it wasn't worth it anymore. And, interestingly enough, as I was reading up on some of the news post-race, Ricardo from Christian Horner will be taking most likely engine penalties in Monza as well. So I don't know if it's stemming from this accident, but, unfortunate for Daniel Ricciardo. Hasn't really had a good run of late. So that's unfortunate for Danny Rick. But, and just the last note on Kimi Räikkönen, the qualifying was just ridiculous from Ferrari. I mean, it's moments like that where you kind of doubt whether they can pull off this championship run. I mean, of course, their whole chips are behind Sebastian Vettel, but they need Kimi as well if they want to get the constructors for sure, and to help Sebastian Vettel win the drivers' championship. But when you just see stuff like that, they underfuel him, and Raikkonen had the pace. He most likely could have gotten pole position, if not first row of the grid. Ferrari just had the pace all weekend long, led every single session except for Q3. So I'm not sure who made that mistake at Ferrari. Raikkonen was pissed. You could see, he looked good in some of the practice sessions. I believe it was FP1 or 2 that he led. I believe it was FP2 that he topped the timing sheets. So he was having a really good weekend, but once again, the team just kind of let him down and then got really unlucky in the race. I mean, that wasn't his fault. But again, he said it himself that the poor qualifying put him in that position behind Grosjean, behind the two Force Indias. So that was the issue with that there. Then you had Valtteri Bottas starting at the back of the grid because of his engine penalty. He ran into the back of Sergei Sorokin, and actually pretty aggressively too. It wasn't even like a touch. I mean, he really ran into the back of him and then pitted under the safety car as well. Valtteri got handed a 5-second penalty post-race, and he actually got 2 points taken off his super license. But he was 7 seconds ahead of the next person behind him. Let me just check who he finished ahead. I believe it was Perez. Let me see here. Yeah, so it was Perez. So Bottas finished P4, which he keeps because he was about 7 seconds ahead with the 5-second penalty. It didn't really affect him that much, but 2 points off of his license was, I guess, the more significant reprimand for Valtteri. He had a really good drive, good recovery drive from him. A lot of people thinking of him of driver of the day, which I would agree with. He made a really good move on, I believe it was Brendan Hartley out of Eau Rouge and then into Radillon on the outside there. That was a really nice drive, nice move. But, I mean, realistically, when you have a Mercedes, I think it's pretty easy to get through the grid. Just you could see it on the straights how much difference the power was, when he was passing a couple of the Renaults and the Honda engine-powered cars. So I sort of lean more toward maybe even a Max Verstappen for driver of the day. He really impressed me in this race. Started P7, finished P3, managed to avoid, all of the troubles of the early, first 10 laps, and then pretty much just ran his own race, since then. They were about almost a half a second behind Mercedes and Ferrari due to, that lack of power in the Renault engine. So I know that a lot of the management in Red Bull are really looking forward to the Honda partnership just because I think they're sick and tired of Renault at this point. Will Honda be better? I don't know. Honestly, Honda looked pretty good in some of the straights, in the Kemmel straight at Spa. Brendan Hartley was having a good battle with Marcus Ericsson where you could kind of see that, it was Honda power versus Ferrari power, but Honda was holding up pretty good. It looked as good as it did in the last, few years. I mean, in years past, they'd get completely blown by any other car on the straights, and now they're sort of holding the ground a little bit more, which is good to see. So that's hopefully a positive for them. But yeah, I just thought that Verstappen, he's really starting to bring his season, kind of full circle from where he started the first 5-6 races of the year. And he's really putting in some good drives and kind of outperforming his teammate. He hopped him in the driver's standings now. And the last sort of 5 or 6 races, pretty much since Monaco, Verstappen has really, really outdriven Daniel Ricciardo. So good for Max Verstappen. And a almost home race for him. He was born in Belgium, but a lot of the Dutch fans make the trip. And, I mean, the support for him was incredible. You guys saw probably all the orange, sort of smoke and stuff going off. So first podium for him in Belgium was probably one of the highlights for him this season. So good for Max Verstappen. And then it was also on lap 1, Vettel passed Hamilton. And this is what we wanted. We said this when we were doing our mid-season review, that we wanted to see Hamilton and Vettel actually battling on the grid. You know what I mean? We've seen Bottas and Vettel, and we've seen Ricciardo and Bottas, but we haven't really seen Vettel and Hamilton, duke it out on track one-on-one. And we finally got that opportunity, but it was pretty short-lived. I mean, we wanted the duel between Vettel and Hamilton, but, instead we got Bottas and Hartley, or Hartley and Ericsson. That was, we got more battles between them than we did the top two. So after he got past him, on that lap 1, it was pretty much over after that. So it was a patient move from Sebastian Vettel. I think he learned from his mistake last year, following Hamilton just a bit too close going into Eau Rouge. But you could tell that I think Ferrari has made a significant step forward, and maybe we can finally officially say that they have the more powerful engine for the first time in the turbo hybrid era. They had a significant power advantage, which is just surprising to see because it's always, this track suited Mercedes the last couple of years. Next week going to Monza, you'd think that, usually Mercedes would have the advantage just because it is a power-heavy circuit. But now we're thinking that, Ferrari could be the favorite, and I think they will be. We'll touch a little bit on that near the end of this podcast. But I think Ferrari, the 2-3 weeks sort of where they're able to work on the engines during the summer break, they've maybe found something. And even Lewis Hamilton was sort of this was pretty funny kind of post race, but he was sulking a lot, and this is a sort of annoying thing. I know you've heard of a lot of us, criticize Lewis Hamilton on this podcast, but it's going to continue now. It's just when I find that he loses, he sulks more than any other driver, in my opinion. Maybe like Max Verstappen is sort of up there as well, but Vettel, Raikkonen, Bottas, they're all sort of the same sort of when they lose, but Hamilton just really seems to be in a sulky mood every time he doesn't win or doesn't put on a good performance. One of the headlines here from racefans.net where Lewis Hamilton said, quote unquote, that they're trying to do a few trick things on the new Ferrari. Now he's not suggesting that they're doing anything illegal, but he's just saying that Mercedes and the rest of the grid just can't understand where Ferrari, is getting this extra power from and extra performance. So, these are the certain comments that Hamilton makes, and I wanted to pull up this video. This was on the interview after Sky Sports 1 with Christian Horner, and Christian Horner, no love lost, I guess, between him and Hamilton and some of the other drivers on the grid, but he was completely honest about Lewis Hamilton complaining about Ferrari, and just have a listen to what he says. It's really funny.
We need to make a step. You can see, the Ferrari and Mercedes, it's just to hear Lewis moaning about Ferrari now, I nearly got my violin out. But, the gap is significant. And I think if we can just close that, and Honda are making great progress.
So that was pretty much in response to, Hamilton complaining almost in a sense that Ferrari, just way too quick on the straights, couldn't catch him. And Christian Horner's like, well, what are you talking about? The last 4 years, you guys have dominated the entire grid, and nobody's been close with the exception of 2017. And even then, they won the championship clearly. So, since 2014 up until this year, they've had the most powerful engine. They've been destroying everybody when it's, come to power-heavy circuits. Now that when the tables are slightly turned, Hamilton has a problem with it. So, that's the sort of irony in it, and it's funny. And that's when Christian Horner was just like, I nearly got my violin out, which that was a really original comment. When I said before, Horner's got no love lost between him and other drivers. You heard, obviously, the drama with Fernando Alonso. Alonso said they offered him a contract. Horner says, no, I didn't. Just a lot of back and forth. So, Lewis, I think this is a good chance for you to prove to everybody that you are the best driver. So, I think it's only fair. We've had 4 years of Mercedes power domination. It's slowly shifting. So, you guys have to cope with it, and that's just how it is. So, I still think that out of the two drivers, he is the better driver, but we'll see what happens, but, definitely you can tell that he's getting a little frustrated. And when you look at the next two races, and including this one, the 3 races, you have Spa, Italy, and Singapore coming up. So Spa already done, of course, Ferrari and Vettel winning there. Italy, which would usually be in this era maybe more suited to Mercedes, could potentially now be more suited for Ferrari with this new engine upgrade, and overall the car just performing a lot better. It's obviously their home race as well, which is super, super important to Ferrari. And then afterwards, Singapore. So Singapore, again, more of a medium downforce track for the cars, and more suited towards somebody like Red Bull or Ferrari. Mercedes have struggled at Singapore within the last couple of years, so it hasn't really been a track that they've gone to feeling really confident. But again, this season has been a lot more of, it's been more race to race instead of, well, we know that at this track, this team's going to do well, and this track doesn't really suit this team. It's sort of been a little bit more evened out this season, I think. and it's sort of more race to race to kind of see who wins at which circuit. So, and a really important next couple of races coming up for both Mercedes and Ferrari. And then just wrapping up on the race, after the safety car restart, Hamilton went for it at the bus stop chicane right after the safety car went in the pits. Was it a mistake? I mean, probably it was, but I think that it comes back again to he knew that Ferrari just had such an advantage in terms of straight line speed and power. He knew that even if he would have maybe slipstreamed, because he didn't have DRS at that point, so maybe he thought that he wasn't going to even catch Vettel on the straight from Eau Rouge into the Kemmel straight, but he went for it. So after that, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. Even after the pit stops, Vettel did a really, really good job of just managing the race, managing the gap, and then eventually just pulled away, and was a really easy victory for him, but really well managed. It was his 52nd career victory. It moved him ahead of Alain Prost, third all-time, which is really impressive when you think about it. Don't forget that Hamilton and Vettel are going for their 5th world title this year. I think that's sort of been a little bit lost at times in the season, but 5 world titles that they're aiming for, and it's going to be one or the other. I mean, nobody else is really in the hunt to win the championship this year, so it's going to happen. It's just a question of will it be Vettel or will it be Hamilton? And then after that, after about 10 or 11 laps or so, it got pretty much boring. There was a huge lull up until the pit stops, and even with the pit stops, people thought it might be a 2-stopper, but it didn't end up being that for the front leaders. So yeah, I mean, after that wasn't really much. Just looking at my notes here, of course, well done to the Racing Point Force India team. Finished P5 and P6, Perez in P5, and then Ocon in P6 in one race. So they lost all their points. They already managed to hop Williams in the constructor standing. So Williams, they're just really, really not doing well this year. So Racing Point Force India already ahead of them in that regard. And, you saw in lap 1, Ocon, he just needed a little bit more room, and he might have been in the lead. So they were feeling pretty racy from the start, but of course it was inevitable that they were going to get caught by drivers like Bottas and Verstappen as well. So, but I think again, after all the stuff that they went through in the whole month, and probably even more that they're going to go through until now until the end of the season, it was a really great weekend for them. So hats off to the entire team, and it was good to see them. A good weekend for Haas, double points finish. A quiet weekend for them. They maybe would have liked to be ahead of Force India, but nevertheless, I think a double points finish was good for them. Good for Romain Grosjean as well to get into the points. Of course, he's been sort of on the chopping block, so to say. Maybe Charles Leclerc will be replacing him, but he really needs some strong performances. Him, I think Hartley as well. Van Dorn, who finished dead last in his home race. Not a good weekend at all for him or for McLaren. They were celebrating, I think, 50 years since their first win. Quite frankly, at this point, it looks like it might be another 50 years before they get another one. It's just been dismal for McLaren. So we'll see who moves when and where as the season plays on. Gasly, another one, he got the news that he's going to Red Bull. He finished P8 in Belgium. Marcus Ericsson rounded out the points in P10. So a good race there for Marcus Ericsson as well to get into the points. And Leclerc, it's been a couple of races since Leclerc has finished in the points, unfortunately. Some bad luck here and there. And, of course, nothing that he could do in the Fernando Alonso incident. So, just glad that those guys are all okay and nothing happened out of that. So just a quick F1 fantasy update for you guys. P1, we got Fishlegs from the United States, who leads with 1,418 points. And just like it is in the championship between Vettel and Hamilton, he's got a 17-point lead over Warrior from India, who has 1,401 points. So pretty close between P1 and P2. And then rounding out P3, we got Red Team 5 from Italy, who's got 1,378 points. So he'll be looking to score some good points going into his home race in Italy. The highest back marker between us is Shaker. He's sitting in P6 with 1,276 points. And, yeah, I'm pretty far back here in P10. I just rounded out the points, just like our boy Marcus Ericsson usually does, just that one lonely point there. It's not been a good couple weeks, so I'm not the best at these fantasy games, but we try anyways, and that's all that we can do. So make sure you're keeping you up to date. They've made some changes on the F1 Fantasy. You can kind of do multiple teams and add more teams instead of just the one that you have now. So check that out. Usually have until the free practice session before the next race on the Friday. So best to usually do it at the beginning of the week just so you don't forget. And, of course, coming back from the summer break, if you've forgotten to do it, make sure you get on it. Just a reminder, the winner of our league, whoever finishes in first position, will receive some special prizes after the final race in Abu Dhabi. So get on that. Get on that if you want to win and be the best in our league for 2018. And, yeah, I think that was pretty much it from the race itself. Not the best race coming back from the summer break. It looked like the boys were eager to get at it from that first lap collision. But in terms of the race as a whole, wasn't the best. Action within the first 10 laps. After that, it was pretty much, business as usual. A couple of good battles in the midfield, but not too much. Bottas starting at the back and Ricciardo's issues sort of spiced things up a little bit. But in the end, it was it was a pretty much foregone conclusion that Sebastian Vettel was going to go for the race win. And, looking ahead to Monza, so we have a back-to-back weekend right away coming from the break. So they will be in Italy, the race on September 2nd. Just a couple of notes for that. Daniel Ricciardo will be taking engine penalties, like I mentioned before. Hulkenberg has his 10th-place grid penalty that will go applied to wherever he qualifies. And then, Hamilton's point lead now to 17 points. Let me just quickly bring up the standings here. And I think this needs to be a really huge weekend for Ferrari. Last year, they got completely embarrassed in Monza. They haven't won at home in quite a long time. I don't know exactly when their last victory was, but they need a really, really good, strong showing here. I'm thinking they got to have at least, a 1-2 finish here. Hopefully Raikkonen can get the 1 in this sense. I know that we're all expecting it, but I think, to really cut into this gap, Ferrari really needs to apply the pressure to Mercedes, and I think that they can definitely do that at their home race in Monza. And the fans are going to be crazy there too. That's probably the best post-race celebration on the grid that they have in all of Formula One. And I think that's about it. We pretty much covered the entire race from start to finish. So that'll be it for the Belgian Grand Prix recap show. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Of course, if you like this channel and if you're a regular watcher, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell as well. You'll get the email notifications whenever we post new videos. I threw up a couple of new F1 2018 videos. If you haven't got the game yet, make sure you go out and get it. I think they've done a really good job this year improving it from 2017, and it's a lot of fun to drive, so I've put a couple videos up there. See if you can beat the lap times. I did it around Belgium in Spa, of course, so we'll probably have a couple more coming your way in the next couple of weeks. And also, we always want to hear from you guys, so, this whole show, we try and be as opinionated as possible, so we want to hear your opinions as well. What did you think of the Belgian Grand Prix? What did you think of the Alonso accident, how the halo came into play, the whole driver market with Force India and Stroll and Ocon? Drop those comments below in this video. Send us some tweets at TBMF1 Show. We're also on Instagram at TBMF1 Show. Or if you're old school, email us at thebackmarkersf1show@gmail.com. If maybe you want to be anonymous or whatever the case is, that's okay. But reach out to us. Well, we want to include you guys in the show. And, it's always good to spark discussion and debate amongst people on the internet. And I'm so glad that we're past Belgium so that we can stop listening to the That's Radion actually memes and tweets and all that, because it was funny for like 10 seconds, and then after that it just got super annoying. I don't know why. Personally, it just really annoyed me after like the first 600 tweets that you saw, but I'm glad that we're past that. Those guys, they do a great job, but that was one of the more annoying videos, I have to say. All right. That's it for me. I've been Chris Cato for the BackMarkers F1 show. We'll be back next week with your Monza predictions. Until then, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with your friends and family. It's great to have F1 back, and it's great to have you guys back listening to our podcast. Until next week, bye for now.